Just days after normal Americans watched in horror as police, reinforced by National Guard troops, used tear gas, batons, and shields on innocent and peaceful protesters so Donald Trump could walk to St. John's Church for a photo op with a Bible, U.S. Senator from Virginia Tim Kaine has announced a National Defense Authorization Act amendment to prohibit the use of military force against peaceful protesters. Kaine, who is a member of the Senate Armed Services Committee, said he will introduce the amendment to the fiscal year 2021 National Defense Authorization Act to prevent the use of military force against American citizens exercising their First Amendment rights. The Armed Services Committee will take up the National Defense Authorization Act next week.
The president is wanting to turn the American military against Americans who are peacefully protesting on domestic soil, which they have every right to do. Again, the spectacle last night of the White House ordering federal law enforcement officials, now these were not military, but federal law enforcement officials to fire tear gas at peaceful protesters who were lawfully assembling prior to the curfew, which would have required them to disperse. It's just shocking. But the thought that we would go beyond that and now have it be the military who might have to do that, I'm not going to stand for it. And I'm going to try to make sure, and I hope my other colleagues on the Armed Services Committee will speak loud and clear, that this is not what the United States military is for. I'm an Armed Services Committee member. I'm a proud supporter of our military. I'm the father of a United States Marine. I come from a state that is as connected to the military mission as any in this country. I can tell you this is not what the United States military is for.
The unconstitutional and brutal assault on the peaceful protesters took place just minutes after Trump said he wanted a military show of force against protesters around the country who are protesting the racially motivated, vicious, inhumane murder of George Floyd by now fired Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin. Chauvin was fired along with 3 other officers that participated in the murder of George Floyd. Originally, Derek Chauvin was the only officer charged with Floyd's death. Chauvin was charged with third-degree murder and second-degree manslaughter. Today, Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison upgraded Chauvin's charge from third-degree murder to second-degree murder and is expected to announce charges against all 4 officers for their role in Floyd's death. The arrest of Chauvin did not stop the protests, which in some cities led to offshoot rioting and looting. According to Paul Butler, a Georgetown law professor and former prosecutor specializing in cases involving corrupt law enforcement officers, homicide charges against police are very rare. He estimates that only about 100 officers nationwide have faced such charges for their on-duty conduct since 2005. And of that 100 or so, only 35 officers were convicted. So if history has any bearing on Chauvin's case or the other officers' cases, they have about a 65% chance of being acquitted and only a 35% chance of being found guilty. Even if they are found guilty, they will more than likely get a slap on the wrist as punishment. So there's no surprise that the massive protests and small offshoots of looting and rioting have continued to this day. However, Trump's answer to quell the unrest is to enact the Insurrection Act of 1807, which would allow him to deploy active duty military troops into U.S. cities to perform law enforcement duties, a power that as of right now, they do not have. Today, Trump's own Secretary of Defense, Mark Esper, publicly disagreed with Trump and said he does not support using the military to quell protests triggered by the death of George Floyd. In what appeared to be a jab at Trump during a press briefing today, Esper said the following, quote, "I say this not only as Secretary of Defense, but also as a former soldier and former member of the National Guard," end quote. Trump, whose cowardice and family money got him 5 deferments during the Vietnam War, has never served in the military, but has said in the past that he knows more than the generals. In the Breaking Through newsroom, Theodore Whitelow, Breaking Through News.